I agree with Senator Tomassoni that we want to keep the state government operating. I agree that there's some funding that we need in this bill. I disagree that this is appropriate to pass today. I think we should send it, no vote, sit down with the governor and the House and tell them these things are not acceptable to the Senate. We want them taken out. We don't want to negotiate. Just get out a red pen and strike through those provisions. That's policy provisions here. I'm not going to go into all the details of things that shouldn't be in here, such as all the game and fish things. I think there are a lot of members of the Senate might have wanted to vote on some of those provisions, but they have no chance other than is it part of an omnibus budget bill. But those aren't the things I'm going to focus on today. I'm going to focus on what one columnist actually I think described as environmental vandalism, where in order to get a budget that we feel we need, I think the state needs, I think the governor and the legislature recognize this is our #1 job this year is to pass a budget. That the only way you can get this budget is if you'll take all these unacceptable provisions. There are, I'll give a couple of examples. The Pollution Control Agency Citizens Board. Some people say, well, we can come back and fix it next year. We actually have a Pollution Control Agency Citizens Board today. If we pass this bill, 2 months from now there won't be one. After almost 50 years, we won't have a Citizens Board anymore. Some say this is unique, and state government it pretty much is. But it's not, this is not a thing for St. Paul bureaucrats. This is not for the PCA. This is for citizens. Citizens who find the bureaucrats not listening to them. People find their messages not being heard. That's who it's for. One issue that drew a lot of attention this year that I think drew some of the people to want to abolish the board, a certain situation in a dairy proposal in western Minnesota. The people who came to speak before the Citizens Board weren't people from St. Paul. The people who came were the neighboring farmers, the local county board folks, local people. They didn't feel their concerns about the environmental risk was being addressed by the agency. They did not feel it was adequate. The proposer didn't have half the land they needed to spread the manure on. They didn't test adequately if they had enough water supply for 130 million gallons a year. Earlier this year, the only policy discussion we had on this wasn't about abolishing the board, but we had a hearing earlier this year in my committee in which we talked about the importance of the board. And we had a woman, a farmer, from a couple miles down the road from this proposed dairy farm. She said dust, other things aren't addressed. She said last summer, because the same dairy has, I think, 3 other huge dairies in the county, she said that she cleaned 1.5 inches of dust out of her closed mailbox from big trucks going in every day, every 5 minutes, trucks to bring food, trucks to bring out milk, trucks going in and out constantly, and whether the roads can handle it, all those issues they felt had not been adequately addressed. So they had one place to turn, the Citizens Board. The Citizens Board, in a rare example, said, you're right, we don't think there's enough information here. They didn't stop the project. They simply said, you got to do a more thorough review. That Citizens Board is not for the PCA. It's not for bureaucrats. That's for people. It's for citizens of Minnesota to have some place to turn to appeal to. If we pass this bill today, that's gone. Trying to get that back, I will guarantee you, it's not going to happen. We lose that for good. Why should we have to say, well, we want to pass a budget so we don't shut down state parks? Why should we have to say, if we're going to do that, then we got to get rid of the Citizens Board? It's been a model, and it's worked, and it hasn't been a problem. That's one provision in here. There are lots more like it. I'll mention the non-ferrous mining waste. There's a provision in here, if If you read the bill, I can't remember what pages, I didn't look at the latest version of it. But you won't understand what it is unless you can read and identify rules. I can't even tell you what section of rules they're in. But directs two commissioners to change certain rules. Effectively, it means so that non-ferrous mining waste is exempted from our solid waste rules. That didn't get heard in any policy committee in the House or the Senate. That's something that now we get a vote on. If we want a budget, you have to vote for that, we're told. I don't think that's the case. And in conference committee, where I first had a chance to vote on it, you know, this was not easily visible. It was tacked on at the end of 3 sections, and I think it was Senator Peterson's bill about landfill siting, who goes first, the county or the state, something we talked about for a year or two and worked out. Decent language. This is put at the end of that section, and it doesn't mention mining, it doesn't mention anything of the sort, it mentions commissioners and rules. Not transparent to the public, and I'll guarantee you, mining is always a controversial issue in Minnesota. But we're told we have to accept that. What's the urgency? We don't have non-ferrous mining in Minnesota. We might sometime, but we don't now. So we don't have any non-ferrous mining waste in Minnesota. So we don't have to deal with it now. It can go through the process. Matter of fact, some of the attorneys who work on these issues and the PCA have disagreements over what the impact of this language is, what's covered and what's not. We don't even have clarity of what it means, but we have to get rid of it now as part of this budget. And I resent the fact that we are told if we want to pass a budget, we have to prove all of these things. And there's other proposals in here that shouldn't be in there. This one's a budget one. But we, I think, in a huge mistake a couple weeks ago in a different bill, passed a policy change in a good bill from last year, a consumer issue. We passed a provision saying that the well-liked by the public pollinator-friendly labeling we set up in place, basically saying if plants had been treated with certain pesticides that are toxic to pollinators, you couldn't label them as pollinator-friendly. If they were not, you could label them that way. In effect, the law was changed this year, so it can be pollinator-friendly if you can't observe the impact on the pollinator upon a contact with the plant. That's nice. That means if a bee or butterfly touches a plant one time, it doesn't fall over, you know? It's impacted, though. The impact on the nervous system is cumulative, and most of these pollinators are going to touch multiple plants. In effect, what that legislation says is you can now label something as pollinator-friendly if it doesn't kill, if it's toxic but doesn't kill the pollinator on the first contact. That's dishonest. I think that really is an offensive thing to constituents, to the public, and I think we're all going to be hearing a lot about that. What does this bill have to do with it? We're putting in public taxpayer dollars to promote that false labeling. That has to come out of this bill. That does not belong in there. On biofuels and biochemicals, there's some good language that was worked out by a coalition of agriculture people, of environmentalists, of economic development folks, and so on. A good package. I agreed to hear the bill as a package because it was that way. Senator Saxhog agreed we'd keep it as an entire package, and to the Senate's credit, it did. What came out of conference committee took out a key portion of that, something that could stimulate the idea of perennial grasses being used as a new biofuel. If it's not, we are putting in, I believe it's about $6 million per year per plant. It's not all in this bill, it's what would come once we start moving forward with this. That would be largely, probably very heavily stocked with corn stover. Taking some corn stover off the land does increase runoff of nutrients, of soil, pesticides, the very thing the buffer bill is trying to prevent against. So we have a provision in this bill that's moving contrary to the buffer bill. And we're going to be using public money, large amounts of public money to do this. I think the biochemical portion, the other portions of it make good sense. But we should not go forward with a half package that's going to make our water quality worse. Because it's not like we can say status quo is okay. That's the whole reason for all the controversy over the buffer bill. Because we have to improve and significantly improve our waters. So we're moving and we're using our tax dollars in this bill to go backwards on that. I don't think it's okay to say, if we want this budget, we have to accept these. I think we're going to hear from our constituents. I think we've already begun hearing from them. I think it makes people cynical, that pollinator-friendly thing. I mean, can anybody with a straight face say that something that doesn't kill you on first contact means it's safe and friendly? That's dishonest, and we're funding that here. And I'd say what we have to do, I don't want to have long negotiations. I think everybody in this room cares about state employees and that they're not laid off. I think we all care about that, and it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to have long, complex negotiations. We get out a red pen, we sit down with the governor and say, these are things the Senate wouldn't live with. Take them out, period. Why is all this policy in this bill in the first place? I realize the whole reason for omnibus budget bills is because we have thousands of different proposals and programs and agencies and things to fund. And you can't have 2,000 bills to deal with 2,000 appropriations. So you put appropriations together. But this is an omnibus budget bill. It's not supposed to be making huge changes that have not been approved by, in the case of the Citizens Board. That didn't pass the House floor. It didn't pass the Senate floor. It was put in conference committee. Huge change like that. And I think our constituents are rightly angry at this. I think we should be rightly angry at this, and we should not be put in a place where we have no choice. I urge us to vote down the bill today. It can be a quick thing. It just, once we have the votes to reject it, then we sit down with the governor and the House and say the Senate would not pass this bill in this shape. Let's reject it. Let's take care of it, not by saying, well, we negotiate this and that. Just say these things are not okay, and we're going to take them out. I've got a red pen. Plenty of other people do too. It won't take long. But I strongly urge us to vote against this. We do not have to take our environment backwards in order to pass a state budget. It doesn't take 2 weeks to resolve that. It takes 1 day. Thank you.